which is on job order costing. There are going to be two types of costing systems that we're going to cover over the last two chapters. This chapter is on job order costing, and chapter 20 is on process costing system. So by now, hopefully what you have done is watched the first introductory video before this one on a manufacturing company that utilizes job order costing. And then you will do the same before you watch the chapter 20 lecture for process costing. So the key thing to keep in mind as we're going through chapter 19 is that we're going to be recording the costs for our products by job in this chapter. And then we move on to chapter 20, we're going to be recording our costs by batch. So those are the two major distinctions. Also, we're really focusing in on the perpetual method in chapter 19, because if we were using the periodic method of recording our inventory, we are not really keeping track all along. We use that system of backing into the materials used. And in chapter 19, we're going to be keeping track of it along the way. So we'll use receiving reports for purchases of material and requisitions for material going into the manufacturing process. That's for material. Now for direct labor, we will be assigning, for each job, we'll be keeping track of labor hours using time tickets. So it's going to be important to know the rate of pay and the number of hours that our employees have worked on each job so that we can assign labor hours by the job. So let's do an example just real quick. What I mean is, let's say I have two jobs, job 101 and job 102. Job 101 may be to make electric guitars. Job 102 may be acoustic guitars for this month. Okay, so job 101, maybe we have a laborer who makes $10 an hour, and it took 6 hours on this particular job. That's $60. And then let's say we have a more skilled laborer, maybe the one who tunes up the guitar at the end. Maybe he makes $15 an hour and worked 8 hours, and that was $120. And for each job, let's say we have materials of 200 and 300, and then we would assign, okay, now we know how much cost the labor was, so we'll add that to job 101. And then we'll figure out the overhead, which I'll discuss in a minute, a calculation to do that, and then we'll total up how much each job cost and how many units each job made. So that's going to be the goal, is we're going to try to, for each job, figure out what are our direct materials for that job, our direct labor for that job, and our overhead to get a total, and then how many units that job created. So for the overhead, you'll need a formula. And this formula for applying overhead to each job is called a predetermined overhead rate. And the formula is an estimate. So we are estimating at the beginning of the period how much overhead costs we think we'll have. And then we divide that by some activity base. Usually this activity base is either labor hours or machine hours. So here's an example of how we might apply overhead. First, we need to know how many hours each job had. So let's say there's 4 jobs, and this job took 10 hours. This one took 12 hours, 15 hours, and 20 hours. So that's going to be our actual hours. But at the beginning of the period, we would have made an estimate first. So we would have said, I think we're going to have overhead costs this period of $50,000, and that's an estimate. And we think we'll have a total of $10,000 labor hours, also an estimate. So we're going to apply overhead for every hour actually worked. We're going to apply $5 an hour. So up here we've got actual hours worked. So in order to figure out how much overhead we will apply to each job, we will use actual hours. So we're going to take $5 times actual hours, and we'll apply $50 to this job, $60 to this job, $75 to that job, and $100 to that job. So we would add up how much direct material, how much labor, and then how much overhead to get the total cost for each job. And we're going to do that by applying an estimate per labor hour. So once we come down to the end of the year, we will have applied a certain amount. Let's say $50,000 was how much we applied, but we actually incurred overhead of $57,000. So that would mean we didn't apply enough of an estimate during the year. So that would mean we're under applied in that situation. Let's say we applied $50,000, but then we only actually had $47,000. So we actually had less overhead than we estimated during the year and applied $50,000. So that would mean we over applied in that situation. Determining under or over applied is going to be something you'll need to do in your practice and then also in your quiz homework. So let's do a long example. So I'm going to start off with, I have Alma Company, and they've got some materials. So we've got two jobs, job 50 and job 51, and we need to determine the total cost of each of these jobs. So let's start with direct material. We have raw material, 60,000 units, was purchased at $12 a unit. So nothing has actually been pulled into a job at that point. So we need to wait until material has been requisitioned or requested into a job. So 25,000 units were requested for job 50 at $10 per unit. So 25,000 units times $10 is $250,000. And then 27,000 units for job 51, and we paid $12 a unit for it. That's going to be $324,000 for that direct material. So let's go ahead and put that under each job. And that's a total so far of $574 that has been used, direct material used. So moving on to labor. So during April, we accumulated 20,000 direct labor hours for job 50 and 24,000 for job 51. And the laborers incurred a rate of $20 per hour for job 50 and $22 per hour for job 51. So what we would need to do is multiply the hours worked. So let's say job 50, we had 20,000 hours times how much we paid them per hour, which was $20. So that's $400,000 for job 50. And we had 24,000 hours for the second job, but we paid them $22 an hour for that one. So that's $528,000 in labor. So that's actual labor costs. So put that up here in our job list. Okay? So far that's a total of $928. Okay, now we need to apply some overhead. So here we have some more information. We have Alma Company. They estimate that their total overhead for this year will be $1,750,000, and direct labor hours are estimated to be 500,000 hours. So the first thing that we need to do is calculate what is our predetermined overhead rate. So the way that we do that is we take our estimated overhead and divide it by our estimated hours. And that gives us a per hour rate to apply overhead. So that's step number one. The second thing that we can do is figure out what is the overhead we should apply. So determine the factory overhead applied to each job. Well, that's going to be based on the labor hours for that job. So job 50 had 20,000 direct labor hours. So we're going to use the overhead rate to apply how much overhead goes to that job, $70,000. Do the same for job 51. They had 24,000 hours, use the same rate, 84,000 is how much we apply to job 51. So let's go up here and put that in our list of total costs. So now that we have direct material, direct labor, and overhead for each of our jobs, we can then total up our total cost. So total cost of job 50, $720,000, and job 51 is $936,000. Okay? So that's the total cost of each of those jobs. We could be adding that in over here as well. Okay, so now the last part is how many units did each job make? So job 50 had 23,040 units and 26,000 for job 51. So once we know how many units it made, we can come up with a per unit cost. So to get a per unit cost, you're going to use this formula. Dollars, which is total cost, over units, total units. So you take $720,000 over 2340. Dollars on the top, units on the bottom. And this will give us a cost per unit, like an average cost per unit of $31.25. So each of these units cost $31.25, so that we know later when we know how much we sold. Let's say we just sold one. We sold one of those units. So our sales are going to be 50, and then our cost of that good that we sold would be $31.25. So our gross profit, if we just sold one unit after making job 50, would be $18.75. So the whole goal of this would be, we're trying to figure out how much our costs are so that when they're sold, we can take them to the income statement. Let's do job 51. So if job 51 cost us $936, and we made 26,000 units with that cost, that's $36 per unit. So whenever we sell units, then that would be the cost that we could take to the income statement after we sell it. Okay, so I've included a really detailed practice for this chapter and the answers for you to go through. So do go through the practice before you attempt the homework, and let me know if you have any questions.